To manage a sprawling disaster, a city transforms. A neighborhood becomes a form becomes a map becomes a plan. Somewhere in that process, the specific needs of a human life are compressed into a single line item that almost fits, but not quite. It is the summer of 2026. A lethal heatwave has settled over the city, turning the pavement into a heat sink. The power grid is straining, and officials are already warning of rolling blackouts that could leave thousands of people without cooling in triple-digit weather. Nora and Mateo are university volunteers assigned to District 4B. Their primary tool is the city's Summer Evacuation Map, a pristine, color-coded guide designed to categorize residents into neat zones of manageable risk. When emergency management relies on a top-down, flattened dataset, it creates a dangerous expectation that reality will follow the rules of a drop-down menu. If the actual conditions on the street deviate from that data, a silent catastrophe begins to take shape. The first houses they visit reveal the gap in the system. They find elderly residents whose only cooling is a single failing box fan. Yet the city's database has them marked as safe with functional air conditioning. They encounter households flagged as having transportation available for a quick evacuation. In reality, the family car has been sitting in the driveway with a dead transmission for weeks, and the owners have no way to reach a cooling center on their own. Under official protocol, the volunteers are told to remain observers. If they find a discrepancy, they log it on their clipboards, update the status field, and move to the next address on the list. During an active heatwave, logging a failure is not the same as fixing it. Strictly following a passive data-gathering protocol while the grid prepares to fail leaves vulnerable people trapped in rising temperatures. Emergency data often reflects a bureaucratic assumption made months ago. It rarely accounts for the real-time survival capability of a household on the day the power goes out. The Keene household exists on the map as a single orangey dot. Inside is Marilyn, an elderly caregiver, and her adult son, Darren, who has limited mobility. The orange dot suggests a moderate concern, but it doesn't mention that their only vehicle is a faded sedan with a flat tire. If the power grid fails, the window unit keeping the living room bearable will cut out. Because of 3 narrow concrete porch steps, Darren cannot exit the house quickly on his own, effectively pinning the family inside a building that holds heat like an oven. This is a static, bureaucratic snapshot. A data point collected weeks ago stays fixed on the timeline, even as this family's actual threat level line spikes in the present. This creates a lethal blind spot between the database and reality. When rapidly moving crises are managed by unchanging data, the most vulnerable people can disappear into the system's errors. Nora and Mateo realize that waiting for the official transport system will take too long. They decide to initiate a manual human override, stepping outside their roles as data collectors. They begin an improvised care sequence, organizing medication, packing essentials, and calling a volunteer van, rather than waiting for a city-dispatched vehicle that might never arrive. The physical reality of survival is grueling. It requires 2 people to brace Darren's weight as he navigates those 3 concrete porch steps in a staggering midday heat that makes the air feel thick and heavy. They reach the van and pull away from the curb, just as the city's power grid reaches its breaking point, triggering the first wave of rolling blackouts across the district. The Keenes were successfully moved because individuals chose to prioritize immediate action over official protocol. Their safety was secured by a manual intervention that the city's grand infrastructure hadn't even authorized. They arrive at a church fellowship hall that has been converted into an improvised cooling center. It is chaotic and crowded with cots and fans, a messy but highly functional sanctuary for people the map missed. Nora sits at a folding table and begins to alter the city's document. She writes over the original pristine data in aggressive blue ink, adding specific handwritten instructions. Transport false, move early, do not wait. The contrast between the 2 layers is significant. The printed map represents a systemic blindness, while the handwritten ink represents active human attention. Real community resilience rarely looks perfectly color-coded. It is usually hyper-localized and built through the labor of people who refuse to let the paperwork win. The failure of the map points to a larger modern condition: climate paralysis. It is the feeling of being overwhelmed by the scale of a crisis until withdrawal feels like the only option. Viewing disaster through a macro lens, like failing power grids, rising global temperatures, and fundamentally broken systems, induces a state of helplessness. The scale makes any individual effort seem irrelevant. The antidote to this dread is a deliberate shift in focus. It requires moving from the global scale back to the microscale, from the map of the city to the specific needs of a single street. Hope is found in the decision to notice. It starts with a highly localized act, like correcting a single bad line on a map. Effective care in a crisis is built on human attention. It is the immediate, localized power of remembering names and choosing not to look away.